Oh, yeah. Very good then. Well, here we are on our third night, our third step on the Eightfold Path, um, to, you know, uh, remind us all of the Eightfold Path. Um, the 8 steps are right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Um, these 8 steps are sometimes grouped into 3 groups, and right speech is the last in the group of wisdom in prajna, along with right view and right intention. Editorial note, I for some reason always try to slide it into the next group. But no, right speech is considered part of wisdom. Right action, right livelihood, and right effort are grouped together under the umbrella of ethics or morality. And lastly, right mindfulness and right concentration fall under the heading of concentration or meditation. Focusing on right speech, it is presented in the negative. It is the abstention from telling lies. It is the abstention from backbiting, slander, and talk that may bring about hatred, enmity, disunity among individuals or groups of people. And just let that one sink in for a moment. That may bring about disunity. It is also the abstention from harsh, rude, malicious, impolite, or abusive language. Impolite or abusive language. And lastly, it is the abstention from idle, useless, and foolish babble or gossip. Yeah, wow. That's a lot all all at one time. You know, there is the echoes of the precepts in those 4 abstentions. You know, it brings to mind for me, do not speak dishonestly, communicate truthfully. In the realm of the inexplicable Dharma, putting forth not one word is the precept of not speaking dishonestly. Not putting forth one word. The Dharma wheel turns from the beginning. There is neither surplus nor lack. The sweet dew covers the earth, and within it lies the truth. And also from the grave precepts, do not dwell on past mistakes. Create wisdom from ignorance. In the realm of the flawless Dharma, not expounding upon error is the precept of not dwelling on past mistakes. Not dwelling on error. In the Buddha Dharma, there is one path, one Dharma, one realization, one practice. Do not engage in fault finding. Do not condone haphazard talk. Abstain from idle, useless, and foolish babble or gossip. Yeah, we got some echoes going on there. That hangs together pretty good. Yeah, putting forth not one word. So I would like to, suggest some forms of speech that we might consider. In this country, the court system has decided that money is a form of speech. Social media, you can consider social media as a form of speech. Bumper stickers, yard signs, you might want to think about them as forms of speech. And, coming back around to putting forth not one word, when we go into retreat, we are silent for many and good reasons. And yet, even in silent retreat, could we consider our posture, our body language, a form of speech? And internally, at all times, what about our self-speech? What about when we talk to ourselves? What type of speech are we using? And I don't have a lot to throw out here right at the beginning, but I have heard that the Buddha also gave us 5 things to consider before speaking. And I have found these very helpful over time. The first, is it factual? Is it true? Secondly, is it helpful? Third, is it kind and spoken in goodwill? Fourth, pleasant or endearing? And lastly, the one that I bring up often is it timely? Is it appropriate? Can it be heard? So is it true, helpful, kind, pleasant? And is this the right time? So I will open this up to all of you. What say you? See what I did there?
I think
I
the
just
idea
had
is,
a couple. Oh, go ahead, Jokai.
I think that we have to turn these things over in our mind before we speak. I have the idea of self-talk. I'm glad you brought that up.
Trish, what do you got?
So a couple of things. I think maybe a year ago I did the precept on communication. So I'm just thinking speech versus communication, and they're related for sure. But I was just kind of thinking, what's the difference between them? Maybe there is none. So that might be something we could talk about. And the other thing is, I like those 5 things the Buddha gave us to think about before you speak. But sometimes you have to say stuff that's not always pleasant. I mean, sometimes that has to happen. And I think when that has to happen, it's important to be kind, to explain why you're saying what you're saying or has to be said. But I mean, so I don't know if it's always possible. I guess it's helpful, but I don't know if it's always possible to be pleasant.
Well, in that one of the 5, the pleasant, it is pleasant or endearing. And I can think of times when I have been told things I didn't really like. And yet that was a very endearing thing for someone to tell me a truth, that it was time for me to hear, and it was factual, and it was kind, and it was endearing. I'm not going to say it was pleasant, though.
I guess I
Um,
don't know what endearing means. Maybe that's my problem.
I take endearing as when you are, you are uh, opening up your heart,
Yeah, okay.
and there is compassion. And I'm thinking of one particular instance, um, when, you know, the person, when they were giving me this news, I didn't want to hear it, but I'm really glad they told me afterwards. And, in retrospect, thinking back on it, um, that wasn't easy for them to tell me.
Wow.
Um, that took a lot, and I am endeared to them or with them for having the strength to tell me something I really didn't want to hear. That wasn't easy for them.
Yeah. Yeah, great. That makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like not always what you say, but how you say it. And if you say it with good intent and kindness and compassion and from your heart, yeah, and it needs to be said because it's true. So it kind of it brings all those things together, all those 5 things together. Yeah.
This is interesting because I do actually have to say unpleasant things to people a lot in my job, because I work with the public. And so this is super helpful, actually. This list is super helpful of how, to consider before speaking. And one of the things we have a training that we go through on how to deal with the public. And there's a number of different sort of tools that they give you. And one of the tools is called pennies in the cup. And so the idea is to just whenever you just with everybody, just be kind and friendly and try to learn. Like this is specifically for homeless patrons. So because they're used to sort of being treated badly everywhere else. So when they come into the library, the idea is to learn their names and just treat them like you would treat anybody else and be kind and compassionate. And so when you do that, you're putting pennies in the cup, he calls it, the guy who's doing the training. And so that when you do have to say something unpleasant, it just kind of goes a little bit easier. Like it's easier to for that person to sort of take because you've been kind to that person. You've treated them with some dignity. So yeah, anyway, interesting.
Muji, thank you for bringing up the idea of self-talk and applying those 5 um, criterion to self-talk. Gosh, um, well, I don't know about everybody else, but it seems like me for sure, and probably I'm not the only one that um, applies a ridiculously high standard to oneself that um, applies harsh self-talk that you would never even think of saying to other people. So I think that's a really good reminder.
Well, also, yes, as mentioned earlier, this ties into communication, and we give messages with our body language even though sometimes we're not aware of what that is. So I know for myself, when I'm impatient, I'm sure people read that. And if I'm actually trying to not listen, to tune out what someone might be saying to me, I'm sure that gives that body signal as well. So if, living in a facility, when I go out my door in the morning, I think, okay, here's my chance. Support harmony in the community. And then I think, well, how long will that stay on my screen? I don't know, but, for me, sometimes having a word that I hook onto in the morning, what's my integrity for the day? I don't know, but our body language can give off communication as well, which can interfere with speech.
Yes, body language, yeah, it is something that we share without really a whole lot of awareness, either what we are sharing or what we pick up. I mean, we may just have a feeling without thinking of where that came from, and it might have been the body language of the person that was checking me out at the grocery store, and I'm left with the residue of an impression, but I don't necessarily know where it came from. And I know, and I gotta think that I am communicating the same way. I'm putting that out there also. I went to look back down here to see where that falls into. That is like the abstaining from rude or impolite language. Did I really mean to put a front, did I really mean to scowl? Was that scowl for you, or was I scowling at something inside? And so there's a lot of mindfulness that comes into play there. Once again, when you're speaking to yourself, cut yourself a little slack on this, because remember, we're just works in progress.
I have a story about my struggles with dishonesty and abusive language. I was very quick tongued, and I would tell people in no uncertain terms what they needed to do to make me happy, and it caused a heck of a lot of trouble. And with dishonesty, my friends used to say of me, Wheeler, you never let the truth stand in the way of a good story, which was true. I've got a lot of good stories, but a big chunk of them weren't true. And I tried to stop those two things, which ended up in a lot of negative self-talk. If I just tried harder, what's wrong with me, blah, 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 blah. And finally, I got sick and tired of beating myself up, and I just stopped trying to be honest, and I stopped trying to be cleaner with my speech. And what I noticed is that with great regularity, I'd be in the middle of telling a lie, and my body would go, Rick, you're doing it again. And it was wonderful. It became this friend in me that very gently told me that when I was being mean to somebody, or this did not need to be said, or the feedback that my body would give me was the most powerful tool in changing my behavior, because it was.
No, that's very true. When you want to talking about self-communication, being able to hear our bodies is like, oh yeah, your gut won't lie to you. Your gut will let you know if you listen. Or your chest or your breathing. And with time and practice, yeah. I've been trying to make friends with myself so that
sticker ways we communicate without saying anything. My old vehicle, I had bumper stickers all over it, but then I had that car forever, and it ended up, going to the junker after many years. And I wondered about putting bumper stickers back on my car, and I haven't put bumper stickers on I think I've had my 4Runner for a good 10 years. And just last week I put 2 bumper stickers. Well, they're stickers, they're not the big bumper stickers, but they're stickers. But I went without bumper stickers for probably at least 10 years. And maybe even longer, it's been maybe even 15 years. And I went to a festival and I put a sticker on the back of my phone. And it it is flipping somebody off. It's basically flipping everybody off. But what it is and I went to this booth and it had a little tiny hand, and it says, I won't say it, but it says F gender roles. But when you'd look at my phone, all you could see was somebody flipping somebody off. The writing was so dang little, you couldn't see gender roles underneath it. So I came home, I kept thinking, God, people are thinking I'm flipping them off, just flipping them off. So I came home, I took the sticker off my back of my phone, stuck it on my mirror in the bathroom. And then when I went back, she has another one that's the full length of my phone. And it says in big letters, F gender roles. And I thought, now nobody will think I'm flipping them off. They'll know that I'm flipping that off. I'm not flipping them off. But now everywhere I take my dang phone, when I hold my phone up, everybody can see this. And so every time, like I was at the doctor's office the other day, waiting, and I was reading with my phone, waiting in the waiting room, in my room, and she walked in and I had my phone up, and I hurried up and shoved it into in my bag and said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she said, "Well, that didn't offend me." And I came home and I thought, dang it, you really need to take that off of your phone, Kim, because even going into retreat next weekend, I thought, God, I could go to retreat next weekend and somebody's going to see my dang phone and think I'm flipping them off. So when you said about the bumper stickers, that internal voice, just keeps telling me, dang it, Kim, you need to rip that thing off the back of your phone, which I'm going to. But it is kind of interesting to think about how we find ways to communicate. It's almost like a passive aggressive way to communicate. And just to kind of think about that, why are we communicating that? What are we saying? I mean, I've always been on the front lines and I always wear my emotions on my shirt sleeve and I say what I'm, what's at the tip of my tongue usually. But I do think it's important to step back and kind of think about that. And it goes to that compassion and all this kind of the 5 things that you listed. So, thank
Joa,
you. Yeah,
may I make a suggestion?
sure.
This is unsolicited advice.
Okay.
Context is important. And awareness of context can be an upaya. It can be a skillful means. So there may be times that your sticker on your phone is skillful, and there may be times and contexts that your sticker on your phone is not skillful. And my unsolicited advice is have 2 cases. Put that sticker on a case. When you want to slap on your F gender roles because you're going somewhere with your besties, pop that sucker on. When you're not wanting to show that to the world, when you're wanting to have a different face on, like both of those aspects of you are true. The part that wants to challenge the world and the part that wants to move in harmony with the world. So find that way to navigate where all aspects of you can be true, depending on the context in which you find yourself. Does that make sense?
It does. And I did think about, those old cases that you could put your phone in and fold it over like a wallet. I did think about that. And I thought, gosh, will it still fit in your back pocket, Kim? Will you, but I did actually think about that, but I haven't done anything about it, but thank you very much.
My response is more about authenticity and less about phone cases.
I know that, but I did think about that, but thank you. I always feel there is that part of me that always feels like the black sheep in the room. And so I really do appreciate the thought. Thank you.
I want to add on to that too. Somebody might see that sticker and really need to see that, just need to see that there's, people out there that kind of have their back or whatever. So, yeah, so just kind of throwing that idea out there.
I was thinking about lawn signs a lot this go around. I did have them 2 elections ago, and I had a pretty positive experience with that. So I've been really thinking about whether I want to do that or not, and because part of me is like, what does it really accomplish? Is it going to change anybody's mind to see somebody's name on my lawn? I don't think so. Probably not. My friend Artie says, well, she thought she was alone in her neighborhood in her beliefs until she saw somebody else's lawn sign, and that made her feel like, part of it, that there was community there for her. And I thought that was kind of positive. But there's another way in which they can be perceived of as confrontational, and I don't want to be confrontational, so I don't know.
I want to bring up a point, and it has to do with speech as speech. And the stickers and lawn signs are one way of communicating, but there is something different about speaking to another human being, verbalizing your thoughts, facing someone directly, listening to their reply. Oftentimes when we speak, it's not unidirectional. There's a conversation. It's bi-directional. And that intimacy of speech is very precious. We have an opportunity to meet another person. We have an opportunity to show ourselves, to be seen. We have an opportunity to see someone else in their completeness, or to the extent to which they wish to show themselves to us. And so how we talk to each other makes a difference. How we hold our boundaries versus stepping aside to accommodate someone else makes a difference in how the conversation turns out. And there's an intimacy there in speech. Notice how it feels different when we are together in a room versus when we are talking to a screen. It makes a difference. And so I would invite you to think about, over this next week, think about how you use speech and what it feels like in conversation, and when you want to lean in, and when you want to run away and hide, and when you second guess yourself. Think about the things that keep you from being fully present when you're speaking to another. And what can you do to make that clearer or more present? What gets in the way of that connection? Sorry, Muji, I jumped on your topic. Back to you.
No, not back to me. No, that was that. Yeah. That speaks to the function of. Oh, I like that. Speaks to the function of speech and communication. You know, why we do this? Why do we do this? Yeah. Okay, and as you were sharing that, I was recalling that conversation I had that I didn't want to have, that was not pleasant, but it was endearing because it was to the benefit of both of us, and it was something we were sharing together, and it was something that was difficult for both of us. And yeah, it wasn't pleasant, but it was endearing. And it is that that sharing with another person that was really important. Speech.
Well, I think like Joshin, when you were saying about being authentic one-on-one, when you're having a conversation, thoughtful conversation with another person, I was thinking, how often do we not necessarily not be authentic, but we really filter what we're saying in any given moment to another person, depending on who the person is, what the subject is, the topic. Are we upset? Are we happy? Is it somebody that you want to be closer to? Is it somebody that you want to step back and not have a really close friendship or relationship with? It's kind of just thought provoking to even think about that. When you're thinking about authentic, are you being authentic when you are kind of putting a guard up? Is it being authentic just to the situation or the person? When you think about maybe your grandmother, you wouldn't have the same conversation with your grandmother that you may have with one of your close friends, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not being authentic with your grandmother. You're just, you're kind of like when you're in the library, to be quiet in the library. You're acclimating to your environment, to the situation, to the person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not being authentic. So it's just kind of food for thought.
The nature of those relationships are different. What comes up in conversation will be different.
I was thinking about unconscious characterization of the person who's talking to you. A person who is apparently very different from you, and you may be miscuing on all kinds of nonverbal or even verbal and not know it. You may be characterizing that other individual in an unflattering way. They may be doing the same thing to you because your speech patterns, your the way you were raised, triggers, or vice versa, triggers memory traces that you're not aware of for a while. It's interesting how.
How do you get past that?
Say it again.
How do you get past that?
It was like Rick's comment. There's a little body twitch that if you notice, you might say, "Oh, I think I'm disrespecting this person for some reason. I'm not listening to their message. I'm caught up in the way they look, the way they talk, the speech patterns. I might notice that, and I think it's the body twitch right before they go for your eyes. You may get a message there. At any rate, I thought about the reception part.
One thing that you could think about, and this is you, all of us, not just you, Shokai, is think about the ways we judge those we're speaking with and our fear of being judged by others as well. And one of the many ways of working with that is learning to not be afraid to be curious, to ask questions, to look like a fool.
I was going to say curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would also suggest you might want to slow down.
I'm a proponent of slow.
We say all the time how many times we try to remind ourselves to pause before we act, before we think, before we say something, not before we think, but before we say something, to just pause. And more than likely, it's probably going to be said in a different way if you take that moment to stop and pause before you say something.
I think that's the body twitch that Rick and Shokai were talking about. You know, that's been alluded to or discussed in detail, actually, in by Joko Beck and Pema Chodron, both totally talked about that feeling you get before you tell some huge lie or fly off the handle and get angry at somebody. That's supposed to be the cue to, pull back the reins, slow down, and think about it for a second or so. And it's really interesting that both of you guys have mentioned that. It's something that we kind of need to use as a physical, mental cue, before we jump off that cliff or do something crazy.
There's so many times that me personally, you can feel everything tighten, you can feel your heart racing a little bit. It's like you can just feel you get a little clammy, and there's this little internal voice that's like telling you this is not going to go well and you probably shouldn't say it. And then but there's this other part that says, the hell with it, it needs to be said, and I say it anyway.
And it feels good after you say it. That's the worst part.
And it's like everything in me told me to keep my mouth shut, and I knew it. And I tried the whole pause thing.
Yeah.
It's almost as bad as you don't do it at the time, but the next day it occurs to you.
Yeah. I wish I'd have said that or something. Yeah.
No, I was thinking I've said something and I don't realize its ill effect until I run back over my memory trace the next day, and I think, oh, paraphrased.
Something you said, Jojen, made me think of, I think, assumptions. So being curious helps for me not to make assumptions, because I think it's easy for me, maybe a lot of us, to make an assumption when somebody says something or does something, make an assumption, but you really don't know. You don't know their intent. I mean, maybe if they're like screaming at you or something, you know their intent, but you don't really know. So if you ask questions, then you don't have to assume things that may or may not be true. And I really think there's a lot of value to that.
Even if we stopped and asked ourselves before we said it, if I'm in their shoes, what are they going to hear? How are they going to perceive this? How will they feel when I say that? If we would even just stop and ask ourselves those questions, if we went, oh my gosh, they're going to be so hurt, or they're going to think I'm saying this and I'm not. I mean, if we would just give ourselves that moment, then it probably would come out very differently.
But there's so much inertia behind the emotion. You can't. I mean, how do you get in front of that? That's the thing. That's supposed to be the physical cue that everybody's been talking about. You're supposed to feel like a tense feeling or something, and that's your cue to stop and think.
There's a reason this is part of the Eightfold Path.
It takes practice. I mean, it just Yeah, it takes a while. Everyone has brought up wonderful points and shared, very thoughtful, very thoughtful. Your comments have been very thoughtful, and something that has just kind of arisen for me is that we are exposed to a lot of harsh and abusive speech in our day-to-day lives. Whether or not we, are aware of it, I have found that there is a lot of unskillful communication, and if I think about how all of us are regarding our communication, how we are saying things that the next day we think, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have said that, or we got out ahead of ourselves and we didn't do a gut check, and we didn't mean it personally, and everything else, all the other thoughtful and thoughtful things and compassion that you have shared. All the folks out there that are generating that unskillful speech, they're probably not a lot different than the 12 of us. And, it wasn't perhaps intentional. And that helps me feel a bit better about, and about, going out and about. And it helps me smile more when I see people, because, hey, they're probably not that much different than the 12 of us. And when do we end?
Now, 2 minutes ago.
2 minutes ago. You want me to offer something?
Sure, go for it.
Oh. Abiding in the ephemeral world like a lotus in muddy water. The mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus we bow to Buddha. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha prajna paramita. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm.